as you start interviewing folks for ministry?
So it is just after 12 o'clock, and I love that, Tom. So we'll really encourage conversation and discussion throughout our time together today. I have just started to record our webinar. So this time is being recorded. Each of you as participants in today's webinar will receive an email after our time today with a link to the recording so that you can re-engage with some of what we talk about today, and don't need to worry about taking extensive notes or anything, just being able to experience the next hour and having a chance through the recording to re-encounter. I want to welcome each of you here. Continue to introduce yourselves. If you haven't yet done that, let us know who you are and where you're from, and we'll welcome others as they continue to join us. And we'll move into our webinar time today. So I want to welcome Tom Thresher to our webinar, and as our presenter. It is so good to have.
Oops, she just froze on my end. Am I still working out there, or are you getting my picture? Okay, good. Okay, well, we'll hang out and wait for Lauren for another minute or so and see what's happening. Yeah, that's a great idea. I will jump in. We'll wait for Lauren to return. So with all the tech whizzes on her end, we should be up and going fairly quickly. So the first thing I want to do is thank Lauren. My gosh, she has made this process so easy. I've never done a webinar that's actually runs this smoothly, despite her losing her audio at this point. Anyway, I just retired as pastor of Suquamish United Church of Christ, and my sense is that we're probably the denomination closest to the United Church. So I have retired from there after 12 years of using integral spirituality, integral theory as a guiding principle, as a model for this church. I'm going to have to talk with my hands, so hopefully it won't be, otherwise I won't be able to say anything. So I was there for 12 years. I've had careers as a college professor, as an artist craftsman, and now we'll see where it all goes. It's been quite wonderful. Anyway, my experience at the church is that we embarked on a journey around the notion of evolving consciousness to meet current issues, which I'll talk about in the webinar, and had great success. It's very bizarre not to have you all talking to me on this, so forgive me if I start to wander a bit. Anyway, so enough about me. Feel free to ask questions as we go along, and I'm actually going to step into and start the webinar now. So here we go. Let me know, can you see, is the PowerPoint available to all of you? Okay, good. Okay, well, let's start. Welcome, and as Lauren mentioned, please type your questions as we go and have as much of a conversation as we possibly can through this medium. Okay, and I can watch the chat. All righty. So let's start with the elephant in the room. Declining church attendance. Maybe this doesn't apply to all of you, or even most of you. That would be delightful if it didn't, but I would be surprised. You've all seen these different graphs. Church attendance is dropping, is dropping, is dropping. In my area out here, and I suspect it also applies up in Vancouver and Victoria area, we are known as the godless Northwest. But what I would like to suggest, well, let me not suggest that soon. And of course, what you see is a deep sense of hopelessness, futility, despair around this. When I talk to churches, kind of the general sense is we don't know how to move ahead. We're clueless. We've tried everything, and it doesn't seem to be changing. And what I would like to offer is a message of hope. In fact, I'm going to make a fairly audacious claim that churches are actually indispensable at this time in history. Sometimes when I mention that, folks just kind of, it'll invite a giggle or something, and you go, you got to be kidding, right? We're so accustomed to seeing churches holding on and trying to bring forth a past that doesn't work, that the idea that we are indispensable almost seems comic. Now, what I am suggesting is not a silver bullet. It does not offer an easy fix. It's actually a reorientation of the church that I think goes back to our roots. Okay, everybody. Okay, Cheryl, yes. I'll have more to say about that. Are you back, Lauren? I can't hear you.
So sorry.
Yeah, that's better. Great. All right. That's fine. Well, I was getting worried here. My support was gone. Anyway. Yep. So anyway, let's take a look at the need, and what we will all recognize is how rapidly our world is complexifying. My mentor, Robert Keegan, argues that we are all in over our heads. And let me outline this using, pushing the wrong button, using a book by our former Vice President, Al Gore. And he suggests 6 drivers of global change. The first is one I'm sure we'll all recognize, what he calls Earth Incorporated, is that the global economy now is knit together by multinational corporations, many of which have assets and income greater than many, many countries. And, you know, in North America here, we're just profoundly aware of corporate interest. In the States here, it's pretty much assumed that corporations buy our elections. Global mind, you know, Teilhard de Chardin spoke of this as the noosphere. I wonder if he ever imagined it would reach this scope technologically. So we're woven together, and of course we see this now in its incredible benefits with the Arab Spring and the horrors of ISIS all in the same time. Decline of U.S. power. When I first read this, and I thought, whoa, that's pretentious. But his argument is pretty persuasive, that the U.S. has been the power broker and the one who has incredible influence to actually be the policeman, or better yet, the country to be a mediator. And we're not playing that role anymore, either out of lack of desire or lack of ability. Unsustainable growth, of course. This is right at the core of our economic system. We think our way out of every problem is to grow faster and faster. This is a huge one. The reinvention of life. All of this work around DNA and our new technologies actually put evolution in our hands, not only technologically with our new science, but just our existence as a species, as the dominant species. As Brian Swim said so eloquently, the snow leopard, the DNA of the snow leopard is now shaped by human actions. And finally, he says, climate change. And we're all becoming increasingly aware of that. My experience of being with folks up in Canada is that there's a much deeper awareness of that in the United States than in the United States. We are still battling over, is it true? It's just astonishing. So these are drivers that have come together in a way that is unprecedented in U.S. history. So the question is, how do we deal with this? And what can the church actually offer? There's a wonderful book called The Watchman's Rattle by Rebecca Costa. I highly recommend it. Let me summarize her argument. She argues that every society, every culture complexifies at a rate that's much faster than our biology can keep up with. So at some point, all of us reach a cognitive threshold, a place where the complexity of our culture starts to exceed our mental and emotional capacities to deal with it. And what we start to see as symptoms are gridlock, and beliefs start to overwhelm facts. Now, I'm not that familiar with the Canadian political process, but when I look at the U.S. process, I kind of go, oh my God, do we have any time left at all? We are so gridlocked here that it's just ridiculous. She argues that even though we can see the changes that need to be made down the line, we stay stuck. We keep kicking the can down the road, and instead of looking at facts, we fall back into much more primitive beliefs, much more childish beliefs, and we start shouting louder and louder and louder, trying to make something change. And of course it doesn't work. So her argument is that to move past that, we need to develop greater mental and emotional complexity combined with spiritual simplicity. Actually, that's not the way she frames it. That's my framing of it. She says that we can move into a different way of knowing through insight. Okay? So, where do we have? What's next here? Okay, so let me back up a little bit. So let me pause there for a minute. This is kind of the framing of why there is such a need for what we have to offer. So any questions, thoughts at this point? I'm tired of hearing myself.
I'm struck by Cheryl, who's commented, I think we have so much to offer and it's just a matter of how we do it. And Jan's comment about finding integral an amazing model for moving forward. And I'm also struck, I'm not seeing anyone type, so please feel free, folks, if you have questions or comments. But thank you, Henriette and Donna. On the slide that we're looking at here, a way forward around mental and emotional complexity and spiritual simplicity. And in the church, it feels like sometimes the way forward is seen as increasing our spiritual complexity, and wondering if that has a tendency then to complicate or confuse the way forward.
Well, I'll actually have some more things to say about it. I'm getting a bit of an echo.
I'm not of yourself?
Yeah. Yes, when I speak.
I'm not hearing an echo.
Yes, when I speak. Anybody else? Anybody else? Okay, Greg's getting it. Okay, Greg's getting it.
So what we can do, folks, is if you, Tom, you might need to just turn your microphone volume down a little bit.
Okay.
Greg's saying, Tom, you sound like a transcendent being.
Let's see if that's better. Sound like a transcendent being. I sound like a transcendent being. Okay. Shall I go into my God voice?
Yeah. So as participants, you might need to play around with your volume a little bit as well. Tom's just adjusted his. If you continue to hear an echo, let us know. I'm not hearing it, and some folks aren't. So let's see if we can figure that out and go forward.
I see some of the questions here.
Yeah.
I see some of the questions here. Spiritual complexity and spiritual simplicity. Let me.
Okay.
That's kind of coming up. So let me.
Henriette is asking if you could please say more about what integral spirituality is.
Oh boy. Oh boy. So I'm leaping ahead, if you will. What I call integral spirituality or integral church comes out of the work predominantly of Ken Wilber, who is this amazing synthesizer of profound thought from around the world. And what I have tried to do is synthesize his 30 or 40 books into a model that the church can actually use. And my hope is that if it works out, we will have more conversations around integral. So I just came back recently from Aurelia in Ontario, where I did a 3-day workshop around integral and how it looks. So where we'll get today is just, I'm making the argument that churches are indispensable, and then follow up, if we can make it happen, is actually how do we do it, and how can we use an integral model to move forward. My claim to authority is I have perhaps made more mistakes than anybody else in the country along this path.
When we both have our mics on, so I'm just going to keep mine muted.
All right, let me move ahead. Oh, good. Yeah. Okay. Echo's gone on my part. Yeah, that's wonderful. I'll move through this because I really do want to have as much conversation as I can with you. So I'll move on ahead and really do, if I'm not responding to your questions, just keep asking. Okay, so let's move ahead. So what does it mean to develop greater mental and emotional complexity grounded in spirituality? And my term for it is that it means this is what evolving consciousness actually means. So, what is consciousness? I'm presumptuous here, probably giving even any attempt at defining it. But the way I am defining it, it's literally the mental, emotional, and spiritual lenses through which we engage reality. And when we change those, we change our relationship to reality. And of course, the question is, why does it matter? So, in terms of mental complexity, our cognitive ability, basically, the more complex our mental frame, the more of reality we can actually see and embrace. You see this all with young children as they develop from early childhood through middle school into teenagers and even hopefully become adults. Building greater emotional complexity really means being able to open our heart and become more inclusive in our capacity for caring. You've all heard of emotional intelligence. This is pointing directly at that kind of developmental movement. And here, where I am talking about spiritual simplicity, I'm talking about that presence that is within us and available all the time, as Wilbur says, always already here, that to the degree we can connect with that or be, in the Christian language, in continuous prayer, then we are less bound to ego and we're making decisions from a different framework. So the question is, how do we make these things happen? And my vision is that churches would actually lead the evolution of human consciousness to create a more just, caring, and sustainable world. Ken Wilber uses a metaphor that is deliberately clunky but really appropriate. He talks about churches being conveyor belts for evolving consciousness. Because evolving consciousness is not one of these things where we have an epiphany that really changes everything, but we're actually doing the ongoing work on a continuing basis. I think this is pretty much what we used to call salvation. And I want to share a personal story. I came to ministry very, very unexpectedly. And I was 48, had some really unusual things happen, and I went off to seminary. I had hardly ever been in a church in my life. My parents had never been in a church in my life. But I had an experience in my 20s that I actually think the leader of this, who was a disaffected Presbyterian minister by the name of Wallace McAfee, you probably know his cousin, Robert McAfee Brown, came and kind of rescued me, if you will, in my late teens. And I got involved with a small group that was engaged in very intensive transformational change. We met twice a week, 3 hours a night. I was involved for 8 years. But what I experienced was this profound shift of awareness and how I saw, how I engaged in the world. So one of the markers of that is that it was my college experience, where early on, before things changed for me, I managed to flunk out of college 5 times, in major part because I didn't bother to show up at classes. I don't know why that was a problem. Anyway, when I finally went back to school, with a different order of consciousness, I went through as an undergraduate with honors and went on to Stanford and wrote a doctorate there, basically an integral doctorate. Now, I'm not smart like the people at Stanford. They are so smart, it's terrifying. But what I brought there were different skills that had been developed in this deep personal work that allowed me to finish when others who were much brighter never did. So what I'm pointing to is here, that's to me what evolution of consciousness looks like, and my sense is this is the kind of work that churches can actually do. All right, let me pause there for a second before we move on. Anybody want to jump in real quick? Thank you, Jim, or Kim. Okay, that's a really good question. What I found over the years is that a small group of folks wanted to do the deeper work. I think over the years in my church, perhaps 30% eventually did the deeper work with me. And what started to happen was it shifted the entire culture. It started to change the language we used, our orientation, and the map that I will develop, I hope, in the future with all of you, is how we can create a comprehensive system that invites everyone in. One of the precepts of integral spirituality or integral Christianity is that the full depth and breadth of our tradition is celebrated for its unique gift. And that makes it quite different from what so many churches are doing, especially on the progressive end, like my denomination. We're kind of at war with the other perspectives, and integral is dramatically different in that sense, in that it welcomes all of the diversity of our tradition and actually has a way to celebrate integrating them and bringing that all forward. So, Cheryl, I would suggest Wilbur's book, Integral Spirituality, is a great book. It doesn't tell too much of the theory. I actually have a book out. Here's the commercial announcement called Reverent Irreverence, Integral Church for the 21st Century, which takes Ken's work and tries to make it more practical and actually get it in a form that's usable for the church. So we'll get all those things to you. Okay, so let me move ahead because a lot of your questions um, are coming up soon. So here's a perspective from psychologists Robert Keegan and Lisa Leahy at Harvard. Their claim is that the deepest hunger, our deepest hunger, is to unfold and make use of our gifts and to somehow become more active and more effective in the world. And of course, this is deeply connected with our own tradition, that we might see more deeply, that we might act more effectively, bring forth the kingdom of God, and to create abundant life. So I don't think anything I'm suggesting stands outside of our Christian tradition unless we've kind of got lost, which I think that would be my argument. Alrighty, so my argument is that churches are precious resources for evolving consciousness. We offer things no one else can offer. So let's look at what churches do first. And please chime in here because my lack of church experience before becoming a minister, churches are still actually a little bit perplexing to me. So please inform me as we go along. So we teach basic morality, but then our families, our schools, TV, and now as I watch my son doing gaming, they're teaching amazing immorality almost, if you would like. We build communities, as do the soccer clubs, Lions Club, PTA. So we're not unique in that. And we engage in social action. In my denomination, in the United Church of Christ, that is the preeminent orientation, is social political action. Some call us Unitarians considering Christ. Okay, what no other institution can offer. This is where the church shines. Oops, did we lose my picture? There it is. Okay. So, this one comes from Ken Wilber. Churches own the great meaning-making stories of Western civilization. By this, the idea is that churches, Christian churches, no, let me start that again. If you were raised in the West, the fundamental cultural story you got came from Christianity. It was the values, the aspirations came from Christianity, and in that sense, the churches own that story. We are the ones who purvey that story and can change it and expand it. So we can create a context in which people who are developing and evolving have the stories to draw on to bring into their own world of personal meaning. In that sense, it's our responsibility to expand our own story to encompass and welcome folks that are on their spiritual journeys, and not to close the door, but to open the door as wide as possible. And only we have that authority with the Christian story. Second, we are invited to change people at their core. Now, I think this is really unique. Schools are invited to educate folks. Psychologists, therapists are invited to fix people so they fit in better. Only the churches, as far as I can tell, are really invited to say, let's go deep. We can look into places that no one else can go and help you change right at the level of your soul. And perhaps the most important is that we have time. We don't have a bottom line. I mean, we do have to worry and pay attention to finances. No doubt about that. But we don't have some corporate board breathing over our shoulder saying that the quarterly return on investment has to be thus and so. We have, if you will, God's time. So in a world that is just absolutely frantic, running around, keeping us busier and busier, we have the cultural authority to say, come to us exactly where you are, and if you would like to make these deep changes, we will walk with you. Okay? And tell me if you think there is another institution that can do that. Greg, I haven't met your stewardship committee. Apparently that's the response to the bottom line idea. Okay. Well, I'm sure you get my point. Yes, I agree. It feels like there's not enough time, and yet the other side of the question is, if we keep racing ahead, making the same mistakes over and over again, will it actually come out with a better result? And what I believe we offer as a kind of a countercultural orientation is, if we're going to really help make a change, we need to bring the culturally given resources we have. I think we're actually in a position to stand counterculturally and say, no, what we're going to do is take some time to do this, to build the deep structures in individuals and in our community that can make the kind of change that's required in our world. I just wonder, if we don't do it, who else will? I don't know who that is. I don't see anybody standing up. And we already have a certain authority to be able to try that. So one of the things that I find encouraging is that as this world changes rapidly, it also creates a context in which evolution and our consciousness actually can evolve surprisingly fast. I have folks that are working with groups that can move people through different stages of development and cognitive complexity surprisingly quickly, and that's a lot of the other work I do as well. So anyway, I have the same questions. Are we in time? So let me move ahead then. The final point I want to make is that churches have the ideal setting for evolving consciousness. And that setting is a judicious balance between support and challenge. So we have support built in. What churches do so well is to build a culture of trust, of engagement, and of commitment. I joke, it used to be that we kind of can go overboard with the support. You know the joke that the point of the pastor is to, what is it, challenge? Oh, I've lost it. Somebody help me out here. To afflict, oh yes, to comfort the afflicted and to afflict the comfortable. I think with our financial situations, we comfort the afflicted and comfort the wealthy even better, so they'll pay the bills. And it's easy to fall into that trap. So we do the support extremely well. And what I'm suggesting is that we need to build more challenge. And we can build more challenge into this really loving, nurturing environment. And that's really what integral spirituality and my work called transformational inquiry, which Jan and Gerhard participated in so wonderfully, is about doing the deep personal work, and hopefully that'll come up in a future time. So what I'm suggesting is, here is this amazing institution. No other institution, as far as I can tell, can do this critical work. So the question is, can we actually do it? Can we stand up and find a way to move into a very different future as leaders on a radical edge in our world, and actually help make a difference? So, how can churches evolve consciousness to create a more... Oh, what is this? Oh, okay, here we go. This is the idea of where we'll go from here if we can. So here's the integral map that I developed. This is basically intended as a summary that can be used on a daily basis in a church setting. And I use this, we projected and viewed all that in the church, and this was a symbol that went all the way through it. Now, without diving too deeply into this, it says a number of things. So let me separate out the components really quickly. That four-part figure on the left comes from integral spirituality's integral work, what Wilber calls the four quadrants. These are four irreducible perspectives on existence. There's the perspective, oops, pushing the wrong place, from the self, from my interior. So completely subjective, what is it like to be me? There is the perspective of our larger cultural story, how we make meaning in the world, our worldviews, etc. Of course, our individual behavior, our actions, all of this studied by our empirical sciences. And then our social systems, how all of the things we do and how all of our actions come together. And what integral church or integral spirituality says, if you engage all of these in a progressive, opening way, then individual consciousness starts to evolve, that we can create an institution where folks are held and nurtured to move ahead, to challenge some of the beliefs that keep them stuck, keep them held, that they didn't even know that they had, and that move forward. Now, there is a developmental sequence that we all tend to move through. These are the three that are kind of at war with one another in Western culture. The traditional view of, if you will, traditional church, the modern atheist anti-church movement, which actually is arguably remarkably spiritual. That's a whole other conversation. And the postmodern, green, environmental movement that really has an awful disdain for modern and traditional. And of course, traditional thinks the moderns and the postmoderns are all Satan incarnate. So those are the culture wars that we face. I didn't put it in, but the next step, and the one that I think progressive churches are really poised to lead, is the step into what I call integral. It's comparable to what Maslow, on an individual basis, called self-actualized. Now, what this does, and as an integral church, we look at this all through the Christian lens. So I had that symbol. Let me see if I can go back here. This symbol I used every Sunday to orient who we are and where we are going. So we would do this quite specifically. From a traditional point of view, we had a regular order of worship. 3 hymns, a sermon, that thing. We did the Lord's Prayer in a traditional form, and this grounded folks and allowed me to push edges with my sermons. Then with our hymns, with our music, we made a point of moving through the entire spiral. So we would sing songs not only from a very inclusive postmodern view, which we actually used your book, More Voices, and got a lot of great stuff out of that. But we would sing very traditional hymns, and we would highlight this and say, yes, this is a deep part of our tradition that has wisdom to contribute to us now. And one of the things I consider a real success is that we could sing a song like Onward Christian Soldiers, which makes most progressives run screaming out of the building. We could sing that and hear, yes, there's something vital in that we need to hear. Not the whole thing, but what are the little pieces of truth? So week by week, we made a point of celebrating the full breadth of this. We'd sing songs that were not only about our relationship to God, but God as the interior, God as nature. So anyway, I'm moving ahead of myself. So let me see, where are we? Back to the... Okay, that's the end of my talking. So I'm happy to have questions. You can find more information about what I'm doing at transformationalinquiry.us. That's the deep work of personal change. Okay. Yes. Well, actually, since I've retired from the church, I've created something called Common House, which is intended to do that work eventually. It's basically what I saw as the next step of the church to coherently and intentionally do this interspiritually and in an interfaith way to move ahead. One of the experiences I had with my church is that we set up all kinds of programs to invite the spiritual but not religious into our community. And we had fabulous attendance at all these workshops and classes and everything like that, but we could never integrate them into the larger church body because I think most of them were allergic to both Christian and to church. So the question is, how do we honor what's happening here and actually move ahead? So that's one that I'm experimenting with. My sense is that these are just starting to emerge. I know progressivechristianity.org is starting to experiment with some of these, and I'm sure there's others out there as well. So I think the social media are taking over some of our job. I think this is an awful lot of what we have to offer. Oh, okay. I was just reading them. Go ahead. Yes, they do actually very, very closely. You probably know Michael Dowd's work or Bruce Sanguin's work. Um, Both of them, especially Bruce, weave his evolutionary spirituality together using integral. It becomes a framework for this. And from an integral orientation, what I have observed is a lot of the evolutionary work, or at least social justice work, focuses on civil action in the world. What integral orientation demands that we do is to look at the interior stories and core beliefs that we hold that we may not be aware of that keep us from being as effective as we would be in our social justice and environmental work. So that's, I think, a place where the church has something very, very real to offer. And so I see this as a huge, a really important asset to that whole evolutionary theology. As I'm reading this, I'm kind of going, oh my gosh, you guys are steps out ahead here of the UCC. We're not there yet. Um, so that's exciting to me. Well, in a sense, both. My experience for the last 12 years was working with an established congregation that was quite progressive and invited me to come do more interior work with them. So I personally think that if the churches can make some kind of transition, in this direction,
So Heidi is
we
is
have
also commenting great question, Harriet. And Heidi is talking about integrating integral Christian community and an integral
as well.
spiritual but not religious community.
Then we're building